So, just a few words of introduction, basically, to Big Society. Big Society lies very much at the heart of this new coalition government's vision and plans. So what I'm going to do today is to give you an introduction to the Big Society, to try and explain a bit more about what this vision means. I'm going to say that Big Society is a new term, but it's certainly not a new idea. I'll talk about the Big Society themes and give you some examples of what's already happening. I'll talk about what the government's doing to play its role in pursuing this vision. And also I'll say something about the spending review settlement and the new transition fund that's just been announced, recognising obviously, as we're all very aware, that we're all in very difficult financial times. And then I'll just finish saying what are some of the implications that there might be from this vision for you. So I was going to start off and ask a question, who's heard of the Big Society? But seeing you're at a Big Society conference, I assume you've heard of it. So we'll try the second question, which is, put up your hand if you feel you've got a reasonable or a good understanding of what Big Society means. Don't be shy. I won't ask you to explain it, by the way, but put up your hand if you think you've got some understanding. Okay, so maybe a third to a half of people. Actually, interestingly, people on this side of the room seem to know more than people on this side. Why is that? So that's better than the last event I spoke at, where I asked people if they'd heard of Big Society, and most people put up their hands, and then I said who feels they understand it, and of about 70, there were maybe two and a half people, so I hope they're a bit more informed at the end than at the start. Okay, so if we just do very briefly family fortunes, if I say Big Society in one or two words, what would you say in response? So you'll have to shout out just so we can all hear. I say Big Society, you say
empowerment.
Community empowerment.
Social action.
Social action. Evolved power.
Government of the cheap.
Government on the cheap.
Less money.
Less money. Community engagement.
Public service reform.
Public service reform. Somebody's seen my slides, haven't you?
Voluntary action.
Voluntary action.
Local solutions.
Local solutions.
Philanthropists giving back.
Philanthropists giving back. Community responsibility. Volunteering. Okay, brilliant. I think you've got pretty good understanding scattered around the room already, actually. At that previous event I mentioned, where there were only 2.5 people who had an idea about what it was about, the best response I got to that question was, do it yourself, which I thought was actually quite true in a way, actually, but we can come on to that. Okay, so what's this Big Society vision? So Big Society is about a huge culture change. It's being described by some ministers as turning government upside down. So instead of central government, or indeed local government, making decisions, it's about local people making those decisions instead. So putting communities in the driving seat, and about government stepping back so that it plays an enabling role, but communities are the ones who actually are the decision makers and drivers. And Big Society is about everyone playing their part, instead of always turning to the state to provide solutions. So for government, Big Society is about releasing power, releasing information and resources down to neighbourhoods. And for citizens in neighbourhoods, it's an invitation to get involved in determining what happens locally. So Big Society very much is part of and complements the localism programme, which pushes power outwards from the centre towards local communities. So the Prime Minister has said that building the Big Society is his great passion. So he said, the Big Society is the vision that makes him get out of bed in the morning. You can see on the slide the photograph there, which you might not be able to see very clearly, but the photograph is of the Big Society launch event, which happened in number 10 back in May. So on the 18th of May, so in the first few weeks of the new coalition government, there was this Big Society launch event. You've got the Prime Minister on the left there, the Deputy Prime Minister opposite him, Nick Howard, the Minister for Civil Society, also to the left of the Deputy Prime Minister, and then various other people who've been involved in the voluntary community sector and social enterprises around the table. And at that event, one of the quotes that the Prime Minister made at that event was, "We want to give citizens, communities and local government the power and information they need to come together, solve the problems they face and build the Britain they want." And then a similar kind of quote from a Big Society event in Liverpool that the Prime Minister was at in July. So big societies where people in their everyday lives, their homes, their neighbourhoods, their workplace, don't always turn to officials, local authorities or central government for answers to the problems they face, but instead feel both free and powerful enough to help themselves and their own communities. So I hope that gives you an idea of the vision, and I think from your comments at the start in the family fortunes thing, show that you've already got a good understanding of it. I think it's good to say that Big Society is not a government programme, so the government is not delivering some kind of Big Society project. Big Society is a vision in which the government plays an enabling role, but the key players in the Big Society vision are citizens themselves, local groups, voluntary sector organisations, social enterprises, the private sector, all of them playing a vital part. And as I said, Big Society is about the government stepping back in order to let communities, to enable communities to step up. Big Society also involves all bits of government, so although the Cabinet Office is the lead department, we are working in partnership with CLG, Communities and Local Government particularly, but also with every other government department, because the Big Society vision is all about everything that government does, so it's a theme being picked up right across government. I think good to say at the outset that Big Society, although it's a new term that maybe we've only been hearing for the last year or so, it's certainly not a new concept. So, over hundreds of years, this country's been built on numerous examples of people giving their time, giving their energy, looking out for others, going out of their way to support people, being involved in their communities, influencing public services and so on. So I think it would be really, really naive and insulting to say, here we are with our Big Society vision. Actually, this kind of activity has been going on for many, many years. So, some of that activity was really big-scale actions that led to huge social change. Probably most of it was much more mundane and day-to-day, but it made a real difference in people's lives. And you'll know, many of you from the organisations you represent or you work with, that day-to-day, that's exactly what your organisations are doing, what your employees are doing, what your volunteers are doing. You're active in this sphere already. So this slide just gives a few examples of ways in which people get involved in their communities, through volunteering, for example, how people are able to contribute to a strong social sector through representative bodies, lobby groups, charities and so on, and also people being able to influence government policy through getting access to government data, public consultations, e-petitions and so on. So Big Society, although a new term, is certainly not a new idea in this country. So Big Society themes. Now, I kind of hesitate to try and put such a big vision into a box and say here are the 6 themes that define Big Society, but I think it is helpful actually to try and just dig a bit under the surface about what it actually means in practice. So in highlighting these 6 themes, I'm not saying this is definitive and Big Society doesn't mean anything else. I just think these are helpful in I guess, directing our thinking. So 6 themes, starting with social action. So, and that's one of the things people said and just at the start. So social action, people being involved in their communities, giving their time, giving their money to good causes. This already happens on a huge scale in this country. So we know that over 17 million adults in England volunteered in 08-09. 74% of people in England gave to charity in the month before the survey was done in 08-09. So huge levels of volunteering and giving already. Second principle is public service reform. So government's committed to radical reform of its approach to public services, becoming a better buyer, and achieving a more diverse and innovative range of service providers, including, importantly, from the voluntary and community sector and social enterprises. So the government wants to create lots of opportunities for BCS and social enterprises to deliver public services through this public service reform agenda. Thirdly, community empowerment. So this is all about neighbourhoods being in charge of their own destinies, able to shape the world around them, and government making it easier for people to get involved, influence and hold others to account. So government making data available and breaking down some of the barriers that there might be to local people determining what happens in their local area. Then fourth principle, decentralisation. So this is the kind of localism idea, pushing power away from central government and giving it to local government and then on to neighbourhoods and individuals. Fifth principle, transparency, making information available. So, for example, about public service outcomes in an area and helping people use that information to hold services to account. And then finally, building capacity. So as an enabler of big society, government has a role in building the capacity of individuals, communities and organisations to play a full part in the agenda. And the government recognises that not all citizens and individuals are in a position to play a full part now at this stage. So those are the principles. I'm going to talk in a minute about some of the ways that those principles are being put into action by this government programme. On the next slide, which I think I might skip over actually for the sake of time, but just some quick examples of big society in action. So you've got charities delivering public services, you've got neighbourhood social action. So Balsall Heath Forum is an example of that, giving skills, not just money, and also creating leaders who educate. So these are some examples of things that are already happening, which predate this government's agenda, but which are very much about people getting involved in public service delivery, voluntary sector organisations being involved in public service delivery, neighbourhood action to address local issues, and so on. Okay, so what's the government doing to pursue this vision? So as I said, big society is a vision of how this government would like to see our society change and develop. It's not a government delivery programme, but the government is taking some steps to try and play its role. So the government sees its role very much as an enabler and as a catalyst of this big society vision to support others who are involved in delivering. So just thinking about the 6 principles again, so promoting social action. You may have heard of the National Citizen Service, which is a big flagship programme to involve young people in community service. So we're developing a pilot programme, we're commissioning a pilot programme from external organisations, which is going to run next summer. So there'll be 10,000 young people, 16 and 17-year-olds, involved in the first pilots of the National Citizen Service next summer, and then 30,000 young people involved in the second round of pilots in summer 2012. So we've been going through a commissioning process to get the right organisations to deliver that programme, and we'll be making an announcement about who the main delivery bodies are going to be next week. So that's one way in which the government's actively promoting social action. Secondly, thinking about public service reform, the government is committed to reforming commissioning, so opening up public services to more providers like charities, social enterprises, as well as private companies. So there's going to be a public service reform white paper in January and a green paper about commissioning before that sometime later in the autumn.